All right, guys, welcome back. This is Of Stone and Clay. I'm your host, Taylor Church, and this is episode 140. Today's guest is Esther Candari. Thank you for joining.
Happy to be there.
Yeah, Esther is an artist, an illustrator, a gallerist. What else are you?
Mediocre plant mom.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Why have you been so mediocre in that area?
Mostly ADD.
Mostly neglect.
Yeah.
Okay. What plants are you just killing off day by day?
I get better at finding ones that aren't killable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like a nice cactus.
Even cactus a little bit. I think they're called snake tongues. Those are practically unkillable.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so we were talking before this. You said you did a graduate degree in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
What did you study in school?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate in painting and sculpture.
Mm.
Did a lot of photography on the side as well. And then I did a residency in New York City in painting and drawing. I guess some sculpture there as well. And so my MFA is in 2D art. So anything
art?
2D, so anything that can lay flat. So
Okay.
drawing, printmaking.
I thought it was like TUDI.
Yeah,
like
no, two-dimensional.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So what is your favorite medium?
The one I use the most is oil painting.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my staple as far as my career. If I could do anything, it would probably be some mix of assemblage and mixed media.
Mm.
Those two are harder to like make consistent in market. So it's kind of the trade-off of like, what works for me in a commercial sense versus like, what do I do for my soul?
Yeah. The oil is more just your bread and butter.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And tell me, so you own a gallery, the Compass Gallery in Provo, Utah. Tell me a little bit. I've been in there a handful of times, done some events in there. Beautiful artwork. Tell me a little bit about the ethos of the gallery and what you had in mind when you started it.
Yeah, so I was a partner at another gallery for 2 years and ended up splitting ways with my business partner and wanted to kind of refine the vision and the brand of the gallery. And I'd been talking with Faith Matters for a while about partnering with them because I'm on their board as well. And just kind of everything coalesced at just the right moment. We were able to open a space. So I share the space with the Faith Matters Foundation. And where our vision and ideals overlap is we both are very committed to helping people connect with big, deep, spiritual, metaphysical ideas that are meaningful to them personally. Faith Matters, their mission is kind of in the name. This idea that faith and spirituality and religion are important for the human soul. And I think that's something that is very much reflected in the type of work that I try to show at the gallery. Part of the reason we landed on the name Compass is this idea of drawing a circle and having, a foot fixed in your faith tradition, but then finding ways to include bigger and bigger ideas and broadening that circle as you work outwards. And so that's something that we try to do is like, how can we help people, have one foot in maybe something they recognize, whether that's like an aesthetic tradition or a narrative that's familiar to them, but then push the other foot just a little bit farther and ask them, okay, how do we think about this in a new way?
Right.
How do we bring more people under the tent of what we're practicing in our community and in our spiritual outreach?
Okay. What's another religion that you're not a part of, but you really like to put a foot in their camp and learn from them and see the beauty in their doctrine and their beliefs and their tradition?
That's a good question. I feel like there's so many. One of the things I loved about my grad school experience, I went to a Baptist school and was able to become friends with and interact with a pretty wide array of Christians across denominations and kind of cultural practices. And I learned so much from that experience of what it means to be a disciple of Christ. And I think, one word that consistently comes to mind is, what does it mean to worship?
Yeah.
For them, that often explicitly means musical things, but even broader, like, what does it really mean to worship God?
Yeah.
What does it mean for me to have a worshipful relationship with God? And so I have some holy envy for the exuberance that I saw in a lot of other Christian traditions, especially, kind of contemporary evangelical, or even I had a lot of Black friends at school and being able to go to Black church. Like, that is a life-changing experience.
Yeah, sure.
And I was so grateful for those, being welcomed into those circles to have those experiences. I'd say outside of the Christian tradition, I studied a lot of Midrash for grad school for the research I was doing, which is Jewish scholarly traditions surrounding religious text.
Okay.
Sort of how do we build narratives and stories and explain the things that maybe don't quite connect the dots in the explicit written text.
Mm.
And just the way that Jewish culture wrestles with the gaps in the narratives and wrestles with unexplained meanings. I have a lot of holy envy for that, and I hope to foster more of that in my religious community. That we can wrestle with these things. We can folklore isn't a scary thing per se.
Right.
It's something that can help us make sense of our stories, make sense of the world. I don't know. I feel like I've learned a lot from. I grew up around a lot of like Buddhist and Shinto people in Hawaii, where I'm from, and the ways that they think about.
Remind me what Shinto believe.
Oh, I am not an expert, so I don't want to say wrong, but it's a lot of it is based around your relationship with your ancestors and ancestor worship. Don't quote me on these things. It's been a hot second since I reviewed Shinto theology, but just a lot of kind of the connections we have in our communities and our families is at least the takeaway I got from the interactions I've had with Shinto practitioners. But just these ideas about looking at the big cycles in life and how all things connect and that we have a responsibility to all things. And I sometimes feel like Christianity can become too individualistic.
Yeah.
That it's about, me and my salvation and my relationship with God. And it can be about that and about I'm connected to the universe.
Right.
And I'm connected to you. And I'm connected to this plant and this rock. And both of those things can be true. And I think there's a lot we can learn from Eastern tradition.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that phrase you used, holy envy. I've never really heard that.
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool because I love the idea of looking at other belief systems and being like, sure, it's easy to maybe poke fun at things that are so different from what you believe or what you've practiced.
Or be afraid.
Yeah, or you might even think deep down they're wrong and I'm right. But to say, well, who cares? I like the way they do this, and maybe you don't even fully want to implement it into your practice or your worship, but to view it as a beautiful thing is really cool.
100%.
Yeah. What for you is a good definition of worship?
Oh, how do you distill that? Because for me, I know worship is an aesthetic experience, and I'm obviously very biased in that regard as an artist. And it's something that I try. I'd say it's kind of at the core of a lot of what we're doing with the Compass is providing people with more aesthetic experiences.
Yeah.
That beauty draws people closer to God.
Yeah.
Whether that's a beautiful musical experience, looking at a beautiful painting, even just the beauty of being involved in creating something, creating an artwork yourself or creating community. There's aesthetics to all of that. And I think for me, that's a defining factor of worship. And this idea that we can't comprehend the divine. I think that's an inherent limitation of mortality. And I think it's harder to intellectualize the divine than it is to try to capture a glimpse of the beauty of the divine.
Right.
If that makes sense. And I think when we celebrate that beauty through worshiping, it draws us closer.
Yeah, I agree. I view it maybe in a similar way. I view it like divinity is this, we'll say this enormous redwood, right? And what we get that we can comprehend are slivers of it.
100%.
Right? We get little tiny bits of divinity that draw us closer to God. But oftentimes we don't even know what we're feeling and we can't put words to it, but it feels good and it feels safe and it feels loving. And for people that are outside of religion or don't believe in a higher power, maybe they use different terminology and have a different vocabulary. But yeah, I love getting my hands on as many slivers as I can,
Yeah.
So do you feel like art is a necessary part of worship?
I think so.
Yeah.
Some form of art. I don't think it always has to be visual or musical or vice versa. But I think it's very significant that you look at almost any major culture and religious tradition in the world. And one of the primary or first terms for God or gods, depending on the religion, is creator.
Mm-hmm.
That the first thing that the divine power in any culture's conception of the universe does is they create something.
Yeah.
And I think connecting the creative process to our connection with God is essential to the nature of God, however you conceptualize that.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. For you, when you're like in the middle of an art project, whether it's painting or some sort of mixed media, do you feel like how often do you feel like you get into a flow state with your art specifically?
Yeah, I think it depends on what I'm working on.
Yeah. Do you rely on it, or do you just kind of hope and take it when it comes?
For certain parts of the process, it's very necessary. Like when
Mm.
I'm ideating how to creatively communicate a concept, I need to be able to some degree tap into flow
Mm-hmm.
to really make sure that it's, the best version of the idea possible so I can work through multiple iterations of it. Um, and, I don't really feel like I'm expressing myself well through the work. Now, sometimes it's kind of like a quick check in at the beginning, and then it's maybe a very technical or maybe not a very personal project. And
Right.
so the rest of it's a very rote
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
But there's some projects where, there's creative problem solving that goes on through almost every single step. And so I have to be able to tap into that through every single step. Or, maybe it's a very personal story that I'm telling. And so being able to be in a good mental and heart space to do that, I need to be in, I don't know if I always necessarily describe it as flow, but a meditative state
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I tend to believe, I wonder if you're the same, that like when you're an artistic person, when you're a creative person, you almost view everything you do as a piece of art,
Yeah.
as sort of a creative act.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel that way?
Very much so. I think it's a double-edged sword sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it definitely leads towards maybe obsessive tendencies over
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
I'm like, I want to make this the most beautiful version, of this dinner I'm making,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
this PDF that I'm making,
Right.
And I sometimes have to slow myself down and be like, okay, you don't have the time or the bandwidth for that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I sent an email today, and I was like, I like looked up this word because I was like, I feel like this is the right word to use. But then I went and was like, got a thesaurus, and I was like, I feel like there's a better word. And I'm
Mhm.
like, this was like a 3-line email,
Yeah.
but yeah, I want the email to be sort of this micro expression, I guess. I don't
Yeah, it's like a snippet of yourself.
know. Right.
Like every interface with the world.
Yeah. Where do you find connection between art and love?
Oh, I think in every way. Like my art is an expression of what and who I love.
Mm.
Um, and a lot of my work relates to ideas of community and identity, and whether it's me coming to better love myself through those things or hoping to encourage other people to love each other better through that. And so I think everything for
Yeah.
me is a
Yeah.
connection.
Do you feel like, okay, you've been, how long have you like seriously been an artist, like deeply in the trenches of it?
Oh, I would say probably since I was about somewhere between 19 and 21.
Okay.
So I was really into sciences when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's like both my parents come from like art and design backgrounds, and part of it was like the rebellious teenager. If my parents do it, it can't be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is I'm a little bit more analytical. I think for me, artists are like very creative, free flowing people, and so I was like, oh, that's just not me. And then I realized that marine biology is what I wanted to study, was not playing with dolphins all day.
Right.
And it was a little bit of a reality check. And I was like, okay, what do I actually love doing? What feeds my soul?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was I really care about speaking to issues that matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was really into like ecological conservation in high school and things like that, and really cared about, social issues that were specific to my community. and I love creating things.
Yeah.
And so kind of process of deduction, I was like, oh, that's what an artist does. Is they speak to things that matter and they create things. And so kind of got myself there and then was like, okay, what do I do with this now? Because I don't really have a lot of training. I don't have a ton of background, decent exposure because my mom was really great at taking us to art museums and, being able to watch my dad's creative process as a designer all growing up. But yeah, just not a lot of technical training. And so studied a little bit before my mission and then really dove into it seriously after my mission.
Okay, gotcha. So in this span of time where you've really been in it, do you feel like you have been able to maybe through the art learn to love yourself more?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. One of the pivotal moments for me as an artist, it was my junior year of college. So I was 21, I think, at the time. And I'd been doing art, I'd say, more seriously for about a year at that point. And I had scheduled a solo show for myself. And it was not something the school was requiring me to do. It was kind of like I needed to like set a deadline for myself to like create a body of work that said something that was meaningful. And it was a series of sculptures. And I decided that what I wanted to talk about with my work was vulnerability and what it means to connect with other people and really explore kind of the raw touch points when we really connect with someone else. And it was coming from kind of a multitude of directions. I was processing a lot of trauma from my mission. I had a lot of kind of complex emotional, spiritual experiences on my mission that I was trying to figure out how to frame in my life. I was on the tail end of like a really complicated relationship, and just trying to navigate kind of what the next phase of my life looked like. And I was at the point where I was like, seriously trying to date and get married, and had just kind of felt like I was falling on my face on the cement in that process. But still just like longing to be connected to the people around me and trying to wrestle with that and not let myself become cut off as I was exploring that process. And so this whole series of sculptures was all about that and looking at kind of life events and, maybe canonical moments of vulnerability that we experience in our lives in a very metaphorical and esoteric way. And originally I'd planned on just doing these sculptures and, putting a label to them and displaying them without, any explanations. And about two days before the show was supposed to open, I was sitting in the gallery where they were getting installed, and I looked around and just felt very strongly that I needed to caption the pieces with excerpts from my journal from that last year and a half of my life. Yeah. And I journaled very extensively in college, just poured my soul into that every single week. And it was a big, scary thought. Yeah. Like, I was the rawest version of me that existed anywhere was on those pages. But it felt like such a strong, clear, divine guidance of like what I needed to do with my voice in that moment. So I went through my journal and I found, one or two paragraphs to go with each piece and, talking about like ugly crying after a breakup and, talking about like wrestling with the fact that like it didn't look like I was going to get married anytime soon and like trying to decide how I felt about having kids and like, whether or not that was going to happen anytime soon. And, these big kind of life decisions and life direction things that I was, right in the middle of at that point in my life. So I printed those out, cut them out, put them next to the paintings. And the night before the show opened, I just sat on the gallery floor and cried because it hit me. I was like, this is the realest version of me I'd ever put out there. It was for all my peers. I was reasonably well known at school, but I was kind of like the awkward, like, cool kid. Not the cool kid, the awkward cool kid.
Right in the sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. Student government kind of person. Okay. Not like captain of the cheerleading team.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people know you, but yeah.
And so it felt too real to put out there. And I was like, oh, I've made the biggest mistake of my life. They're going to be like, oh, she's just like crazy. Nobody's going to want to date me now. But I was like, nope, I've come this far. Like, we're just going to accept it. Just got to jump off this cliff, pull the plug, whatever you want to call it, go into it. And the opening is great. People seem to love the stuff. Don't really have like super deep conversations with people typically at openings. But one of the things I'd done for the show, because one of my guiding beliefs of art is that you should experience it and then it should change how you interface with the world. And so I often try to build elements into my shows that invite people to interface with the world based on how they've experienced my work. And so for that show, I had a little table set out that had blank note cards on it. And I invited anyone who visited the show to write a note to someone in their life who'd been vulnerable with them, thanking them for that vulnerability. Because I think it's a gift that we take for granted.
Yeah.
And I was hoping, as they considered what those situations look like in their life, they could offer gratitude for that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, maybe even slow down to realize that they had gratitude for that in their
Mm-hmm.
lives. What I was not expecting is that a bunch of people wrote notes to me.
Mm.
And that was not at all the intention.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
take this out. That's the point is, go and apply it in your lives. And so I came back 2 days later to check on the show, and there was a massive stack of notes written to me.
Mm.
Some of them were just like cute, little kid down the street, like, I love this. This is great. Here's a stick drawing of a dog. But then there's one note in that stack that I now have framed, and it hangs next to my easel in my studio. And it said, whenever I have dark nights like this again, I will remember your art and find hope.
Mm.
And I was just like to the heart,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it was just like in that moment, like, it doesn't matter how anybody else experienced this show.
Yeah.
Like, that person needed my vulnerability.
Right.
That
What was
person
that
needed to
specific
see
piece?
just the whole experience of the show. Like,
Gotcha.
it wasn't a response to a single piece. It was
Yeah.
just this whole idea of like, putting myself out there in such a raw way made someone else feel like it's okay that I'm messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay that I'm struggling with these questions too.
Yeah.
And like that, like the reason I have that frame next to my easel now is because that's what I want to think about every time I sit down to paint.
Yeah.
Is like, who's having that dark night of a soul right now
Right.
that needs to see my ugliness or to see hope or, whatever it might be that I can put out there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it's important to remember that a lot of times people that are having those dark nights, they're looking for any little thread of hope, and they're going to find it. Like, it's just such a unique personal thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe only one person had such an impactful night, but sometimes you have a conversation with somebody and that gives them hope.
Yeah.
And something you share gives them hope. And so that's sort of the beauty of vulnerability, right? Is it's giving someone else permission to do the same.
Yeah.
When you made that ask for people to share that with somebody that was vulnerable with them, who did you have somebody in mind that had helped you and had been really vulnerable for you?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think part of what I was struggling with in my life at that point is I'd felt like I'd been vulnerable with a lot of people and hadn't necessarily seen that in return. But I do think there were some experiences I had on my mission that were, positive in that regard. Like, I had, some companions that I was really in the thick of it with that, I had a companion whose brother died by suicide. I had, companions with really hard family situations and really traumatic life experiences that we got to, sit in those things together. And they made me a better person because they were willing to open those things up to me.
Yeah. So what do you say to people that maybe have had a similar experience where they're like, I'm naturally so vulnerable and I share with so many people, but I feel like it hasn't been reciprocated in the same way. What's some good counsel for them?
Oh, because I don't know if I'm certified to say that, but
right. But you don't want to, you don't want that to shut you down and turn off your vulnerability, right? How have you dealt with that though?
Yeah. And that's kind of what that whole show was about. It was like, I was feeling that pull to draw into myself and to like not make genuine art and to not keep trying to make friends and to not keep dating because I felt rebuffed in so many ways or, misunderstood. I think the thing I would say is that the more you get to know yourself, the less scary it feels to be open because you're not attaching the private view of yourself to shame.
Right.
You're not attaching your private view of yourself to guilt. Now, I don't think it necessarily means that you share everything with everyone. I think the beauty of intimacy, and you can look at that, in a broad definition of intimacy, is that you have things that you keep sacred to yourself and open those, beautiful little gifts up in more intimate settings, whatever that might be. And for me, in my art, I feel like that's kind of building layers of symbolism in sometimes, where I'll have things I'm like, okay, this is clearly the story that this piece is telling, but maybe I'll add kind of Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody's asking me about my piece, how much I'll say about it will depend on like how, intimate do I want this moment to be?
Yeah.
How much do I want to say about myself and what I
Right.
think in that? And it's fun to, feel like there's things that I can like, they need it or I need it in this moment. I can open up this further little door
Mm-hmm.
to give people insight.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. When tell me a little bit about meeting your husband.
Yeah. So we were the beta generation of the Mutual app.
Okay, great.
Back in the day when there was only like a few thousand people on it worldwide.
Right, which is like an LDS dating app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were both in our first years of grad school, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Virginia, and the university I was at, there was 3 other students of my faith at the school.
Mm.
And I, really wanted to date somebody within my faith. And 2 of those other students were married, so off the market. I guess there was 5, because 2 were married, 1 was a woman. So there was 1 single guy of my own religion.
Okay, great.
At a school of 13,000
That's
students.
who you married?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we met. He was on the opposite end of the continent.
Gotcha.
And so that like really drove me to like be more engaged in online dating. So
Okay.
there just weren't a lot of options in my immediate vicinity. Yeah, I was flying out here to Utah for a friend's wedding. So he was here in Utah. I was in Virginia. And I was like, you know what? I'm like, I'm going to take this advantage to go on as many dates as I can.
Mhm.
I mean, Utah for a week. I'm
Yeah.
like, I can do like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Right.
Like if nothing, I'll get free meals every
Sure.
single day, right?
Yeah.
And so just, changed because at that point you could like pick a location and like
Mhm.
pin that you're going to be there. And so I pinned it to Utah. Just started, chatting with a bunch of guys, lining up some dates, and started talking with my husband. And he'll always tease me because he did not have great photos on the app.
Okay. Yeah.
He's a chemist. He's a biochemist.
He's a
And-
chemist.
Yeah.
Okay. Say no
And-
more.
Yeah, and very, very sociable as far
Mhm.
as like scientists go, but
Right.
just not always one to prioritize aesthetics.
Right.
And his dating profile showed that.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, he's getting a PhD because he just started his PhD at the time. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh, he's smart. He prioritizes academics, things that matter to me. He had a motorcycle and he was in a band.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, it's like I can get past the like okay photos.
Okay, the first chemist in a band and has a motorcycle.
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, it intrigues me. And he's like, oh, you're such a snob. He's such a snob about photos. I'm like, and it's kind of my profession to be a snob about visual things.
Right.
I'm sorry that you almost fell victim to that. But you did it. So.
Right.
Anyway, so we started chatting, and this was like a month or so before my trip. And the longer we chatted, the more dates I canceled.
Nice.
And so basically by the time I flew out, we were pretty much going exclusive. And the thing for me that was like a selling point, we were both, quote unquote older by Latter-day Saint standards at that point. I'd finished undergrad. I was in grad school. I was 23, turning 24. He was 20, I think he was 26 when we met, which, by every other standard is not old at all.
Sure.
But it felt old in comparison to our friends. Like
Yeah.
a lot of our friends were married. Some had like 2 kids already.
Yeah, I'd give you my arm to be 26. Yeah.
I know. It's like I look back now and I'm like, oh, such a baby.
Mm.
But it didn't feel like being a baby at that
Yeah.
point. And, we both dated a fair amount. And I think we had a pretty clear vision of what we were looking for in a partner. And, it had a lot of our each own ugly experiences and not finding that or, thinking we'd found it and realizing, that we really hadn't. And so we just dove right into some really deep conversations. And it was a fascinating dynamic to start off a relationship that was completely long distance.
Mhm.
Because we were just FaceTiming and texting, and it was really about the intellectual and emotional element of the relationship.
Yeah.
Like the social and physical didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so we really had to like ask ourselves, like, can we connect on these 2 levels and be engaged enough to care about everything else?
Yeah.
And the thing for us that was kind of the turnkey moment was I had written a talk or like a sermon to give in my congregation. And it was all about a lot of the negative experiences I had on my mission.
Okay.
And it was kind of looking at it from the framework of how do we love something that's got warts?
Mhm.
Like, how do I love my faith when my faith has done me dirty?
Yeah.
How do I love the people in my faith when they've done me dirty?
Mm.
How do I see past that to my personal relationship with God?
Yeah.
Um,
So super light topic.
Very light.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I sent it to him mostly just kind of as like a, hey, we've been talking, like this kind of an insight into like how I see some things. Like if you've got any pointers on how to make this a better talk, I'd love your feedback. You're a smart guy. And I went to bed and I woke up the next morning and he had overnighted me flowers and bought me a ticket to come, like, even though I'd already had a trip scheduled, he'd bought me another ticket to come back like a month after my
Oh,
scheduled
wow.
trip and was like, basically like, you're the one, I want to do this.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
And I didn't respond for like 12 hours
Yeah.
because it kind of freaked me out.
Yeah.
I dated a lot of guys that like could not make a decision to save their lives.
Right.
Like, many of them were really wonderful men, but just like weren't sure if I was what they wanted in life, weren't sure what they wanted in life, period. Or just like I didn't feel like really knew me and just kind of wanted to marry me because I was there.
Sure.
And I feel like the way he expressed himself, he's like, okay, I see you. I want to marry you for you.
Yeah.
I want to be with you for you. That was freaky.
But yeah, well, there's a fine line between like love bombing and just being like a really loving, expressive person.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I would have not necessarily taken it as love bombing, but I would have been like, yo, we haven't even met.
I know exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, you seem crazy.
Okay. But I assume you got over that. And how special was like when you guys first met and first connected?
It
was a
really,
pretty immediate connection.
Yeah, no, it really was. So yeah, we met in person a couple weeks after that. And we pretty much knew at that point we were going to get married. Like we kind of talked about it softly, hadn't like committed anything, but we're like, this just feels really right.
Yeah.
Like we share, so many kind of perspectives on who we want to be as people, how we want the world to be and what we want to contribute to that. We were communicating well. Then we got married and realized that, we had a long ways to go with communication, but I think that's most people.
Yeah. Well, I assume it sounds like you guys probably got married pretty darn quick, right?
Ish. So we dated long distance for, I think it was 8 months when everything was said and done.
But how much time did you have in person?
Out of that, probably like a month total.
Okay.
We try to spend like Christmas and other breaks together. We flew back and forth to see each other a lot. But yeah, not a lot comparatively.
Yeah. What have you said you've been married like 7 years?
Yep. 7 years this May.
What do you feel like you've learned about just love as an idea, as a principle in that time?
Oh, so many things. And I don't know, I feel like the more you learn about the relationships, the less you feel qualified to talk about them. And I think, I don't know, how do I distill that? I feel like the more I've learned that it's a choice. And I think that's something that was clear for us both at the beginning, is how much you have to choose to be with each other. Like, I think we're both romantics in our own ways, but I think we'd both seen the relationships that were only romantic and where there wasn't active choice.
Yeah, there wasn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, we both experienced that. And I feel like at this point in our lives we're kind of like in a weird transitional period where he just finished grad school, I'm in the middle of like starting a big business, and we're having to do a lot of kind of gut checks of like, how are we choosing each other on the day to day? In what ways have we maybe not chosen each other over the last, chunk of time, and how do we need to rediscover that? So yeah, that love doesn't find you, you choose it in many ways.
Yeah. I think it's kind of both, you kind of, like, I love the phrase fall in love, because it literally sometimes feels like you're falling.
Yeah.
You're like, what is going on? I have no power over my limbs. I'm just, but then ultimately you have to choose to stick with it and work at it and improve it. How do you feel like it's improved over these years?
I feel like something I recently just gotten better at is not treasuring something so much I'm afraid to break it. It's probably how I'd phrase it. And I think there's many times where I was so afraid to really say what I was thinking or to face something that was a confrontation in our relationship. Excuse me, just a second.
No, you're good.
It's dust in my throat. And what I'm realizing with that is that it was like this little glass cage I was holding.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I view our relationship as like so precious and so tender that if we bring confrontation into it, it's going to break.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the longer that I hold those things that we need to confront inside, it becomes a pipe bomb.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it's going to shatter eventually.
Mhm.
And so it's just putting it off, not actually addressing it.
Yeah. How different are your communication styles?
Oh, fairly different.
Yeah.
I'm definitely, it's funny, like we often feel like we're kind of gender swapped in our relationship. He's like the very, in many ways, like more of the emotive one
Mm-hmm.
and more of the kind of, I'd say probably emotionally in tune one. And I'm kind of like the pragmatic one.
Yeah.
And it gets locked into like the to-do list and like the goals and like all these other things, or just, busy with other things in life. And so he has to kind of pull me back to earth and be like, okay, how are we connecting on a soul level?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did the dishes, whatever it is, but like, what are we doing here to like truly see each other?
Yeah.
And I'm getting better at slowing down and finding those moments.
Mm-hmm. Is compromise a big part of your relationship, or is it more working together to discover what's the best, thing for us?
I don't know. I think we're kind of in the thick of that right now.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know. Ask me again in a
Yeah.
couple years.
Okay. I'll ask your husband. That's
Yeah.
a better question.
Should get him on sometime. He'd have some
right.
get the totally other side of this conversation.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask you a little bit about you. You've done some illustrations for Brandon Sanderson. That's really cool. How did you get connected with him?
Relationships, actually.
Yeah.
So when I first moved out here to Utah, I was really lucky to be able to be quickly kind of plugged into the local community. And the visual arts community here is very collaborative,
Mm-hmm.
Very supportive. A lot of that stems from work that Howard and Shari Lyon, they're a couple that are both professional artists, that they've done to build community. And so, yeah, I just got to be friends with them and a lot of other people and just do projects and social events and lots of different things together. And Howard has worked with Brandon before and is a very successful fantasy illustrator himself. And so he'd recommended me a few times, kind of helped get me on the radar. And then just, I don't know, just existing and having a body of work that fit for what they were looking for that specific project.
Cool. And did you just do a cover, or have you done other things?
Just so I did all the illustrations for his latest book that just came out this last month.
Okay.
I didn't do the cover. There was another artist that did, but all the interiors are mine.
Okay, gotcha. Mm-hmm. Is this part of the what's it called, the Stormlight Archive?
It's part of the same universe, so it's a Cosmere book.
Okay.
But it's a standalone.
Gotcha. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So, okay. I'm a novice at this because it's funny. I don't really care for fantasy and sci-fi. However, I have a lot of friends that are obsessed with Brandon Sanderson, right? And so one of my best friends who doesn't read very much, he's just been listening to the books.
Yep.
He's like, all right, dude, I'm finally going to read this book. Will you read it with me? And I'm like, okay, whatever. So it's like, it's like a 1,000-page book.
Yeah. it's not a small commitment.
And yeah. And I read enough that I'm like, he's like trying to warn me and give me all the caveats. And I'm like, I'll be okay. I'm a decent reader, even though fantasy's a new genre for me. But yeah, I'm wondering if it's the same in the one you illustrated, but every like chapter, there's little sketches and little things. Is that kind of what you did? Very cool.
Yeah. So it's a fun book.
It's a big project.
Yeah, it was a very big project. Yeah. It took a good chunk of last year. It's set on a tropical world, which is a big part of the reason I got hired, because they try to match the illustrator's background to the project with a lot of these.
So very detail oriented. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we were trying to set the tone for the project, I was like, reading this feels like watching a lot of like the old documentary movies that I grew up with, or, looking at captain's ship logs from the 1800s.
Mhm.
And so we kind of combined a little bit of like that 1800s lithography and like etching style work that you might see in like an old adventure book,
Right.
with like some Indiana Jones. And then there's like a little bit of sci-fi that gets woven into the story too. And
Okay.
so it's really fun. And
Yeah.
it pulled from a lot of things that are like happy childhood memories for me as
Right.
well.
Were you into fantasy before that?
Yeah, I've always loved fantasy. I homeschooled growing up and was a massive nerd.
Hmm.
Um, Kind of fell off the reading train in college just because I was so swamped doing other things.
Yeah.
And so this was the first like big fantasy book that I'd honestly read cover to cover since, probably like middle of college. But yeah, it was a good point to dive back in.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's got to be an interesting project because Brandon probably wanted you to be deeply familiar with everything,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so did you feel like would you meet with him and talk about the book or was there a liaison? How was that process?
Yeah, so it's all run through his art director.
Hmm.
One of the things Brandon is so brilliant at is guarding his creative time.
Right.
Like I learned a lot from just observing how he manages his company and how efficient it is and how much he's delegated it out and like scheduled it down to a T. And people are always like, how does he crank out what he does? And then, to a degree, it is superhuman.
Sure.
But to a large part, it's just really dedicating himself to finding that creative time. And so that means we didn't meet in person ever for like the back and forth. We did a live stream once, and then I see him at events and things like that.
Right.
But most of it was filtered through his team. But yeah, no, we'd meet or like communicate over email. Probably almost every week towards the end of the project.
Mm.
Just kind of go back and forth, make sure that it captured the vision that he wanted. Also make sure that continuity was good. That was a new experience for me because usually when I'm creating, it's just kind of me in my own little world, and like if it matches something else or not doesn't really matter. But for this, because it's existing in this massive multiverse, essentially.
Right, everything has to be perfect.
Yeah, and there's characters that are like referenced in other books, and so there's a lot of research that had to be done to be like, okay, wait, like is this character wearing red or blue, or like how many buttons do they have on their coat? These like little
Right.
technical details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you is that something you enjoyed enough that you want to do a lot of illustration like that in the future?
Probably not primarily, but
Mhm.
definitely to some degree.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the challenge of having to noodle through someone else's work and figure
Yeah.
out, how do I work collaboratively with what's going on here. Um, I've been so honored and just kind of blown away with how amazing the fan base is.
Yeah.
It feels like a very heavy responsibility to represent these characters that people are really invested in.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I have this like mantle upon me.
Right.
um, but I also really just love doing my own work too. And so it's kind of this balance of like, yes, I definitely want to do more, but like I also want to make sure that I have space to, I don't know, keep cultivating the rich worlds in my own mind
Yeah.
and in my own heart.
Yeah. What how inspiring was it, even though maybe you didn't work super closely with Sanderson himself, how inspiring was it to just be around an artist so prolific?
Yeah.
Like you talked about efficiency of
Mhm.
work, but just his output is just insane.
Yeah.
And as an artist myself, I love prolific artists because it's
Mhm.
so inspiring. You're like, okay, it took me this long to do this project, and they've pumped out 5 since.
Yeah.
And so yeah, what was that? How inspiring was that for you?
Oh, really inspiring. I would say probably what was more actually inspiring for me was seeing how genuine and deeply integritous he and his whole team were.
Mm,
Like the art industry can be very cutthroat. It can be very competitive. It can be very opaque. And I never felt that way at all through any single step of the process. Like I was respected as a professional. I was respected as an expert in my field. I was seen, very much as an equal team collaborator on the project. Um, and just the way that like I observed his team treat each other. Like you can tell when somebody's
just good culture.
that they
Yeah.
developed a really good company culture. And the classical saying of like don't get to know your heroes.
Hmm.
Like that's not at all been true for Brandon
Right.
and for his wife Emily, anybody else that's on their team that's kind of more well known. That the more I've gotten to know them, the more I realize that like they deeply care about being good people.
Yeah.
And they deeply care about encouraging creativity in others. And just the sheer fact that he's invested so much in creating good art to go with his writing, and that he, purposely seeks out new artists to be a patron of for these books. He could find, the one or two that have always been there, but no, like he purposely will find new people and try to bring them in and bring new perspectives and new styles in, and to, trust someone like me that didn't have a background as a fantasy illustrator.
Right.
And like, I was very upfront with them when they pulled me in for the first meeting. I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is the type of project that people like work their entire career to get, but I don't want you to offer it to me without fully understanding, like, I'm coming to this kind of as a newbie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and I won't be offended if you decide to change courses, because, like, I honestly don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And they're like, it's fine. We'll hold your hand through the process.
Okay,
and I was like, okay.
That's cool. So did they want any, like, obviously you have plenty of art they could check out, but did they say like, hey, show us some of your like sketches and give us some idea of how your fantasy illustrations might look like?
Not really. They just said, hey, we like your religious stuff. We like your historical stuff. It should translate well. Here's the contract.
Wow, perfect. Wow.
It felt like, it was an intimidating amount of trust. And then they also were already starting to run the crowdfunding campaign, which was unexpectedly stressful. Like, it's wild watching literally millions of dollars worth of merchandise that hasn't been made yet, that you're in large part responsible for helping to make
right.
pre-sell. And it's
I didn't even think about how a lot of your illustrations will become merchandise.
Yeah.
Right. Has that been true with that specific book?
We're just starting to do that because the book just barely launched about a month ago. So they're just focusing on getting the book out. And then I'll be launching prints and things in September, and they're doing their own merch and stuff. But nice. Yeah, they did pre-sales for all the book. It was all crowdfunded. That's got to
be, I mean, we don't have to get into details, but is that a pretty good, like, thing to be attached to merchandise wise, like as far as your contract?
Yeah, and they are very generous with the way that they structure their licensing deals. Like, some companies, when you work for them, it's what's called work for hire. So basically they're renting your brain and your skills, and when it's done deal, like, you have no connection to the work that you created.
Right.
Theirs is almost the exact opposite, where, like, they license it for the use of the book and, like, kind of set a few parameters around, like, what they want you to use it for and, like, how it has to be, like, credited on things. But you can make prints basically for the rest of your life, and you get to keep all of the proceeds from that, which is a very generous deal for a situation like this. And to be able to tap into a fan base that's millions and millions of people across the globe, like, it's such a gift. I recognize that. Yeah.
So, if you drew a character that becomes like an action figure, do you get a percentage of those proceeds?
No, so that's like a whole different department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. I want to read this quote to you, and I want to hear your thoughts. This is by Paulo Coelho, and he says, maybe the journey isn't about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so that you can be who you were meant to be in the first place.
Man. I'll take this from an art perspective. So with traditional art forms, you talk a lot about additive and reductive processes. So, for example, sculpting in stone is a reductive process.
Right.
Because you take a big block and you're just chipping away with it, and whatever you're left with is the art form. Painting is typically an additive process. You're taking a blank canvas and you're adding something to it. For me, where I have found the most joy and fulfillment as an artist, and where I've learned the most about myself, is when I can do both. My kind of like religious framing of it is like, I believe in mediums and materials that believe in forgiveness, that there's this room to add and subtract throughout the entire process. And I felt that for my character as I've practiced as an artist, that I'll recognize things, in other people or in, maybe a faith tradition, that I'm like, oh, I need to add that to my palette.
Yeah.
Or I'll recognize things in myself that I'm like, oh, that's a piece of stone I need to chip away. And maintaining the flexibility to do both of those things. Yeah. That it's not about just stripping yourself bare. It's a renovation process.
Yeah.
Sometimes you tear out drywall, sometimes you paint.
Right.
You need both.
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective to say life needs to be reductive and additive. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. For you, as as an artist, yes, but also just as a person, what is your, this is maybe a weird question, but what is your relationship with sadness?
Mm.
Yeah.
Robust, I would
Okay.
say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's one of those funny things coming from, I would say, kind of the cultural and religious tradition I come from. I don't feel like Latter-day Saints are sure what to do with sadness.
Hmm.
And that's something that I love probing into with my
Hmm.
work. Um, so for example, my thesis series in grad school was all about experiences of infertility in Judeo-Christian religious tradition. So looking at stories like Sarah and Hannah and Elizabeth, specifically the experiences of women, and then trying to pinpoint how we can use those narratives to better create holistic experiences and relationships with women in contemporary religious communities that are experiencing infertility. And one of the fascinating things that I discovered through some of the primary research I did for the project is I looked at hundreds of images across multiple different databases depicting these iconic stories of infertility in the Bible or um, in kind of the books of Moses, if you're looking at it from a Judeo perspective. And one of the interesting things was it was about 75% of those paintings were about the women after they've experienced the miracle and have had a child.
Hmm.
About 25% had to do with something else. And of that 25%, it was like between 3 and 5%, if I remember correctly, were about sitting in their infertility.
Mm.
And the deep sadness and social stigma and emotional and relationship complexities that came with them not being able to bear children. And for me, that was just such a clear indicator that we don't know what to do with sadness
Yeah.
in religious communities. We
Hmm.
don't know what to do with unanswered questions and grief and mourning. We want to paint the happy miracle.
Right.
And so that's what I did for my thesis, was to not paint the happy miracle,
Hmm.
was to paint the women sitting in that sadness, to paint Hannah fighting with her husband because he doesn't understand what she's experiencing, and to paint Sarah angry and, really emotionally conflicted over the dynamic between her husband and her handmaid, and to paint the contention between Rachel and Leah as sisters who, kind of compared to each other as, the pretty infertile one and the fertile not pretty one,
Yeah.
and like all these ways that we as women get pitted against each other,
Hmm.
or that our sorrow becomes um subsumed by other social pressures. That, part of the power of that story, of each of those stories, is the personal sorrow that those women experienced. But we often ice skate right past it and go to, you know, the bigger picture of like whether it's, oh, they experienced a miracle later, or,
Hmm.
this is their role in society, instead of just being like, no, what can we learn from that personal sorrow?
Yeah.
You've experienced personal sorrow like that. And sacred text is supposed to help us to be able to sit with those experiences.
Right. Yeah. And I think so many people, probably in most religions,
Mm-hmm.
I think when sadness hits, their, maybe what they've been conditioned to believe is, well, I need to be better at my religion, right? Or I
Yeah.
need to pray harder, I need to
Mm-hmm.
go to church more, I'm doing something
I think
wrong.
that's a distinctly Protestant approach to things.
Sure.
I don't think that's maybe as much the mentality even within Catholicism, and it's definitely not the mentality, say, within Buddhism.
Hmm.
So, like, Buddhism has a worldview that sorrow is an inevitable part of your cycle on this earth, and it's not so much about excising the sorrow or fixing the sorrow as it is learning from the sorrow
Hmm.
and living in the sorrow and seeing it as part of an essential myriad of experiences that you're having. And so that kind of dives into like theologically, how do we think about sorrow?
Hmm.
And, as Christians, are we even thinking about it in a theologically sound way?
Right.
Which I'd argue broadly we aren't.
Hmm.
We're letting our culture or, very surface level understandings of our doctrine inform our approach to sorrow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, one of my favorite scriptures that I love to go back to, because I think sometimes we feel an immense amount of shame for being sad,
Yeah.
right? Is when it says that Christ was a man of sorrow, acquainted with grief.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if this is our great exemplar, we shouldn't feel so bad, you know? And also it shows that there's great reasons to feel sorrow and to feel grief, you
Very
know?
much so.
Our life is like, it's replete with tragedy all the time, you know? And to me, I think as I've matured and gotten older, I've realized maybe this more Buddhist take, right? That sorrow is going to come and go, and that's okay. And I'm just going to rejoice when I do have moments of joy and when I do have moments of happiness. And sometimes they last for a while, and sometimes they're really fleeting. And I don't want to be so sad that I'm sad. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think, again, to bring things back to art terms, because that's how I view the world, one of the foundational principles to creating an image, like if you're working realistically, if you're trying to depict, a landscape or a portrait or something, is you have to have contrast. You have to have light against dark. You have to have bright colors against not bright colors. For white to exist, black has to exist. And for joy to exist, sorrow has to exist. And if we excise all of the sorrow, joy can't structurally exist.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard thing to wrap our heads around sometimes.
Yeah. It's a jagged little pill to get involved with, because I think sometimes, especially if your sadness has been somewhat protracted, you get obsessed with like, how can I get rid of it? Like you said, how can I excise it from my life? And I don't think that's necessarily the answer, right? It's more about understanding that certain things are going to elicit sadness. And, maybe there's certain behaviors or certain things you're doing that could improve your situation, make you less sad, make you ruminate less. But yeah, sadness is just part of it.
Yeah.
That's not so bad.
No, totally. Yeah. It's a tool you can build with too. Like I love breaking down for people what art is actually made out of. Like most paint is made out of dirt. It's, specific minerals. Some of the modern colors are, chemical blends at this point. But traditionally, you went and found dirt and you ground it up. You went and found leaves. You went and found bugs. You ground it up. And so we're taking something that's seen as so mundane or dirty or, just insignificant in so many ways. And that's how we end up with the Mona Lisa.
Right.
The Mona Lisa is made out of dirt.
Yeah.
And ground up bugs and ground up seeds. Linseed oil, the main oil in oil paint, is from a common weed, basically. And so how do we transform sorrow and pain and anger? Like, they're still there. The dirt's still there. It's not something new necessarily, but the way that it's framed and the way it's presented to the world and the way it allows us to connect with other people is new.
Yeah. So what have you done personally when you're sitting with sadness to try and not numb yourself, but also not sit in it too long?
Eat a lot of chocolate.
Eat a lot of chocolate. Good. That's good.
Excellent life advice.
Yeah.
The darker, the better.
Sure.
I don't know. I make things. Like I look at some of the pieces that have been really impactful in my life. Maybe not always like in my career, but like for me personally. And they often come out of a place of darkness. They come out of a place of pain. And it might not be immediately obvious sometimes. It might be more of a joyful piece, but maybe I needed to feel joy, and so I had to create joy in that moment. And that's how I found it again, was through it. Or maybe I needed to express sorrow. Like I think about like the first piece I ever painted that made me feel like I could be a painter. And that's a whole interesting dynamic, is like the psychological process of accepting that you're an artist.
Yeah.
We could do a whole podcast just on that. It was a piece I did my last semester in undergrad. And it was of a friend of mine that I'd met at school who was a refugee, and she'd been adopted by an American family and came from very horrible circumstances. And had then used her platform and the privilege she had, being in America, to start a nonprofit to address child trafficking in her home country. And so we painted this very somber kind of pleading portrait of her to capture that emotion of like recognizing, you know, the trauma she did experience in childhood, but then also the one she recognized that she escaped because she got out of those circumstances sooner than other people did, and then how she channeled that into advocacy work. And for me, I think part of the reason that piece was such a turning point for me is because it spoke to these big, hard questions that in many ways all of us have to ask at some point. You know, the why me or the why not me? And what do I do about it?
Yeah.
I think those are things we all ask ourselves. And I don't know, that was just a piece that kind of clicked. And I was like, I think I can do this. I think I'm an artist.
Right. What's your advice to people that love art so much and fancy themselves artists, but are like, I don't know how I can ever make money doing this?
Yeah.
You know, and I think you've done such a good job of, and I don't know if you were always like this, but realizing, okay, maybe my love is oil painting, but I'm going to open a gallery. I'm going to illustrate. I'm going to do graphic design. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And the revenue sources will come.
Yeah.
You know, and instead of just saying, no, I'm a painter, I'm only going to paint, you know, but yeah, what's your advice?
I think you have to always keep one foot rooted in reality and the other foot rooted in your dream. And the minute you lose footing in either, that's in my experience when people, you know, lose stability, essentially. And I've seen both. I've seen people that have become so sucked into like just chasing the numbers and chasing the cash, chasing the next trend, that, you know, in some cases they've been able to make a career out of it, but you can tell it's a soulless career.
Right. Yeah, they become hacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's just like they don't have any joy in it. You know, you see them at openings, they're just like, I'm here because I have to be here. I'm like, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing this? Like, go be an accountant or something.
Right.
And then I've seen other ones who are so kind of self-absorbed in like a very specific vision of who they want to be and how they want to execute that they never check in with the broader world. And they never think critically about how to get from point A to point B.
Right.
And realize that to be a successful artist, you have to be a successful entrepreneur.
Right.
Like it's a small business that you're running. And
especially nowadays where you can market yourself so much easier.
It's a much flexible small business.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And it's an interesting dynamic for me to navigate as a gallerist, because I have to make a different argument for my existence as a gallerist than I would have 20 years ago. That, you know, I play a different social role than previously because artists can have completely independent careers. And I love that.
Yeah.
You know, I do that in many ways for myself as an artist. And so, yeah, just really making sure that you're holding those two things in tension. So much of life is not A or B, it's somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And that's one of those that you have to be a little delusional.
Right.
But not too delusional.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I struggled, you know, I initially just wanted to write books, right? And I still do write, but as podcasting came along and became something I was interested in, I started to realize, well, this is probably a better way to grow my name and get an audience. And then eventually I can funnel people back and have them find my books and stuff. But I think had I been a little bit too fixated on, no, I'm a writer, this is what I'm going to do, then I probably would have been a little delusional. Yeah. Honestly.
A little too delusional.
Yeah. I
think starting a podcast is a little delusional, and that's okay.
Sure.
Like you need a little bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure. Yeah. Opening a gallery sounds for sure delusional.
Yeah. And I love how you highlighted there that, you know, you knew what you wanted to communicate to the world, but you stayed open to what that form of communication looked like. Yeah. And I think that's very true across mediums. And for me, that's something I've had to think about, is that, you know, I would love in many ways to just shut myself in my studio and just make mixed media paintings all day. But I have to ask, oh no, you know, maybe I should take that gig illustrating something for a magazine, and maybe I should, you know, try to enter this show, or, you know, all these different things, looking at it creatively, but trying to stay true to the things that I care about saying.
Right.
And when that's the thread that connects all the work that I'm doing, it's amazing the things that come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
I always use the analogy. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up watching the Muppets movies. I don't know if you did too. Muppets from Space. And there's this part where one of the characters is trying to connect with his extraterrestrial family.
Yeah.
And his roommates punk him and convince him that if he builds a jacuzzi, his extraterrestrial family will show up and reconnect with him. Long story short, it actually happens. Like it's this whole like heartwarming story, but the tagline with it is "Build a jacuzzi and we will come."
Right. I believe that.
Yeah. I was like, I'll show up with a jacuzzi.
Yeah.
But I feel that way about my career. That there's been so many things where I've just had to show up and build a jacuzzi on a topic that I care about, and the money and the opportunity find me.
Yeah.
And there's things I have to do to think creatively and strategically about that process, but it's an act of faith in many ways.
Yeah, but do you think you honestly would have gotten anywhere with your art if you didn't infuse it with some entrepreneurial aspirations?
Definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to have that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It's not blind faith.
Right.
It's strategic faith.
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. I think that should hopefully be preached in all like art classes and art majors and MFA programs, because it's tough.
I think it's just a good guiding life principle, tying this back in with the other things we talked about. Like, I think a good relationship is not blind love. It's conscious, chosen love. I think good faith is not blind faith. It's open-eyed faith.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we are afraid of approaching things that way because we're afraid of what we might see or what we might discover. But that doesn't change the fact that it's there.
Yeah.
And for it to really succeed, we have to face the ugly things. And as an artist, that sometimes means looking at the bank account,
Sure, yeah.
That means looking at the business plan. That means asking yourself questions about your pro forma.
Yeah. I've had some unforgivable bank accounts.
Yeah, I think we all have. But never opening that app doesn't make it go away.
Right, right.
Never confronting that conflict with your spouse doesn't make it go away. Never, admitting that you doubt something about your faith or that something ugly happened in the history of your faith. Don't make those things go away. They just make them fester.
Yeah. What is your personal relationship with God look like? How important is that to you? And how has that sort of evolved over time?
I'd say messy and creative.
Yeah.
That's probably how I describe that.
How is your relationship with deity creative?
I really strongly believe that we co-create with God. That we're not here as puppets of some higher power. But we're also not independent.
Right.
That in a best case scenario, we're walking hand in hand. And that sometimes I get to choose the step and sometimes I need that step guided. And we kind of trade back and forth. And just in the same way that when I'm working on a collaborative project, it's often the best when we bring all of our ideas to the table. We figure out what is the shared vision? What are we trying to accomplish here? And then what parts of these ideas are going to get us there? I feel like that's how I see my relationship with my heavenly parents, is that I have a vision of who I want to be. They have a vision of who they want me to be. And I come to the table with all my messy parts, and they come to the table with, here's the things we can do to help you bridge the gaps you need to bridge. And now let's walk together through this.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think your belief system, whatever it is, not only does it not need to be like clean and tidy and organized, it probably isn't.
Yeah.
If you really look deep enough into it, and I think that's okay. And I think I love what you said earlier that, faith and religion, it's a wrestle. You're constantly trying to figure out, okay, is this what I believe and why do I believe it? And what does that mean?
Yeah.
We
all have a theological junk drawer. Some of us are just better at admitting it than others.
Right. And some of it's a long drawer.
Yeah, it's a deep drawer in some cases. Yeah. And it fluctuates. Like sometimes it's really full. Sometimes there's only a few things knocking around in there, but it's always there. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think for me, some of the things, it's an interesting analogy. Like some of the things in my junk drawer, I'm just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm not fully like maybe I don't fully accept something or understand it or even believe it,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess my roots and other things are so strong. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's okay.
Yeah.
I can have some popsicle sticks
Mm-hmm.
in my junk drawer and it doesn't really affect me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And sometimes it's like that one screw that you know belongs to something important, but you've forgotten what it belongs to. And you're just like, it doesn't make sense now, but it'll find a spot for it later. And sometimes it's like, I do this with stuff because
Mhm.
I've been trying to declutter more the last few years. It's like, I'll put it in a drawer or in a box. And if I haven't opened that drawer or box to pull it out within a
Mhm.
certain time period, then I'm like, we're going to let it go.
Yeah, probably don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think about that, ideologically too, where I'm like, okay, we're going to put this thing away because I don't know how to deal with it right now.
Mhm.
And we'll revisit it in a year or two
Yeah.
or, in a month or two, whatever it
Right.
is, and decide if we can just let it go, if it's not actually important to, who I'm trying to become.
Yeah. As an artist, do you think about having like one big like magnum opus?
I don't personally think that way. I know some
Yeah.
artists do.
Right. Do you think about a body of work that you leave behind?
I think more about a legacy is
Uh-huh.
probably how I see it.
Yeah.
I want. It sounds like so egotistical. It's like I want to be remembered.
Well,
Well,
everybody does.
yeah, I think we all do.
Yeah.
But like, I want to be remembered for the type of impact I've had on the
Mhm.
world. I don't want to be remembered for one piece.
Sure.
I want to be remembered for the way that community and ideas shifted and coalesced because of the work that I did.
Mhm.
I think that's, you could say, my magnum opus.
Yeah, yeah. And the beautiful thing, and not everyone believes this theologically, but I believe that in the next life, basically all things will be known.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really beautiful to think, well, in the next life, you'll maybe be able to know every single person that was affected by your
Yeah.
work
Mm-hmm.
because it'll just never happen here on earth.
No.
Hopefully, when you get physical notes and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that or comments, it feels really good and it's
Yeah.
really encouraging to keep going. But yeah, most people that are impacted will never articulate that to you.
Yeah.
You know.
And you have to accept that. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
But I also really appreciate when people express that. It's one of those funny dynamics because I'm also fairly active on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Every now and then I'll get somebody reach out and say, like, I'm sorry to bug you, but I just really wanted to share this experience. I'm like, you don't realize how precious those things are to me. Like, I exist in this bubble a lot of the time where I'm just painting or drawing away and, putting it out there into the ether and I don't know what's happening with it.
Yeah.
And so to have those touch points with reality of like, oh, this is what it's doing in real people's lives, like those are the things that I cling to.
Yeah. Yeah. I was listening to this interview with, I think it was Cormac McCarthy. He's one of my favorite writers. And someone asked him, like, what he thought about how one of his books was being perceived in the public.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, after I write it, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
I thought that was such an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Just to wrap up, I like to kind of turn the mics around and see if you have any questions for me.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to hear how doing this podcast has shifted or informed your creative process. Because you talked about how, your initial goal was to become a writer and this kind of came as a secondary route to that. Do you think you'd be the same sort of writer if you hadn't done this or not?
That's a really good question. I think it definitely like keeps my creative juices flowing because I'm not always writing, even though I would like to always be writing. Like I have, my creativity ebbs and flows there, but with this, it sort of fuels another part of my creative that I really enjoy. I don't know that it necessarily makes me a better writer, but I do think, I think ultimately it does because I think podcasting makes me a more curious person, a more observant person, and that'll make you a better writer, I think. So, yeah, ultimately, podcasting just gets me so incredibly curious about the human condition. And I think that, makes me a better writer for sure. Yeah.
Makes sense. So my next question would be, I feel like as I've slowly become somewhat of, a very small scale internet personality within my little niche.
Mm-hmm.
People both know me better and know me worse.
Uh-huh.
And it's this weird dichotomy where I feel like people think they know me, but I don't think they actually do.
Right.
I don't think I owe it to them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting line to navigate of like, what do I owe to the world?
Yeah.
When I have, a degree of public facing to my work and my identity. But then also when I interact with people in the real world who know me from the digital world,
Mm-hmm.
that question of like, but do they know me?
Sure.
Like, is that something you think about?
Yeah, you can't help it,
Uh-huh.
right? And I think it's so personal to each person. Like
Yeah.
I would have maybe even advice for you, but you might be like, well, I don't want to do that, But for me, I've just decided I'm comfortable having my whole life out there.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable sharing constantly
Mhm.
and having people be able to peer in. And I think when I share about my personal life, like on my stories and stuff,
Mhm.
I think it makes the podcast more rich because they have more context
Yeah.
and background. And so, yeah, I have no problem with it. I just have to realize there are areas where I have to establish boundaries,
Mhm.
right? And I don't even really like that word because I don't really care if people know all my stuff.
Mhm.
It's more about my personal bandwidth,
Yeah.
right? That's where like I want to interact with people and I want to respond to comments and DMs, but at a certain point you can't.
Yeah.
Right. And like obviously I'm nowhere near this scale, but like with Brandon Sanderson, it's like I'm sure he would have loved to have met with you one-on-one
Yeah.
and held your hand through the process, but he has a whole team now and he just doesn't have the bandwidth, right? And so but yeah, I don't care if people come up to me and they think that they know me because I know that they know a snippet of me.
Yeah.
and sometimes that's like sometimes maybe that snippet was really impactful for them.
Yeah.
And so that's maybe more powerful than had we just gone to lunch and talked about the NBA playoffs, And so I think the nature of what I do, sometimes I struggle with people that want to like ask me a deep question, but don't have 2 hours to talk to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not great with brevity.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times because I've become, I'm such an open person in public, people want to share and want to ask for advice and want to glom onto that. And that's fine. I just can't engage with everyone, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think my last question I would have, it's a little bit of like a side quest. I have been talking and wrestling a lot with what AI means in my space. And there's a lot of parallels in the creative space, whether that's, as a content creator or as a writer. And something I've been thinking a lot about is AI image generators can do the same functional job as I do.
Yeah.
Like I want a painting of a person on a beach. Like they can do that now. And like with the rise of like AI content creators, like, somebody needs a talking head to advertise a shampoo or, talk about a certain lifestyle thing. Like we are replaceable.
Sure.
Essentially. But are we? And what does it mean to not be replaceable in a space that feels very replaceable right now?
Yeah. It's funny. I have a lot of friends that fret a lot about AI, and I just don't. I think ultimately I'm trying to establish something that it's like I'm not replaceable because people are following me because they like me, right? Because they're interested in what I have to say, not just what someone has to say, And so in the same way with your art, it's like, sure, technically, and as years progress and AI gets better, maybe your art is even easier to duplicate. But people, I think, especially as AI increases, I think people will want more an authentic piece of art from a human being, and if they can put a face to it and hear your story and see your journal entries and all that, it's way more meaningful, and AI can't do that, And so I'm like, sure, AI can put together a 2-hour podcast about a gallerist and someone that had studied art and someone who's done illustrations, and they could make it cogent and interesting, but there's no pathos. No one cares about if there's emotion in that episode. No one cares about it because it's fake. And so to me, like, I use ChatGPT all the time, but I don't use it like I would never like ask ChatGPT to make a caption for me. I might ask ChatGPT for ideas, and then something will spark and I'll write my own. But I don't want my art to be robotic.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Esther, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
You've been awesome. Very deeply well spoken.
Thank you.
And I really just love what you said about, I think the thing that's sticking with me the most is this idea that your walk with God can and maybe should be a creative walk, and not just, it's funny, you said with your husband in that relationship, it's maybe you struggle with being overly pragmatic, right? But to not do that with God,
yeah,
right? And to have that be a creative walk and a creative dance, and let it be a little bit messy. Yeah.
Amen to that.
Okay. Amen. All right.